Alright guys, in this video we're going to be solving October-November 24 P41 question number 1, and we're going to be dealing with string handling. Alright, so for this question you need to have a text file data.txt, and this is going to be storing the content, and you need this file to perform the question. Alright, so I have this file over here, data.txt, and it's going to be storing string data items. Each item will be on a new line. So in part A, we need to make the function read data. So it has a local array of strings that can store 45 items, reads each line of data, meaning from the text file, and then it stores it in the array. Alright, pretty simple. Then returns the array. Okay, so I'm just going to be making this, and it doesn't take any parameter. Then I'm going to be declaring a local array. So this is going to be str array for string array, and this is just going to be multiplied by 45. Alright, if nothing was defined to me, like how many items are there in the text file, then I would have just put in an empty list, and later on I would have used the append function. But since we have everything defined over here, I'm just gonna be typing in as it is, and I'm gonna be typing in comments. So alright, that's string array, and then now I'm gonna be reading each line of data and store it in the array. So I'm gonna be running a for loop. Oh wait, first let me open the file. So file is equals to open, and it's gonna be data.txt. It's gonna be for mode read, and now I'm gonna be running the for loop for 45 times, and I'm going to be reading each line. So my line is going to be this, going to be reading the line, and then I'm going to be using the strip function to get rid of any unnecessary spaces. And now I'm going to be storing this in my array. So I'm going to be storing it to the respective index, and line is going to be stored over here. Alright, so this is it. I'm going to be closing file, and then return the array. Alright, pretty simple. We've got 6 marks over here. Oh, one more thing. Usually in file handling we use exception handling, so maybe that's why there are 6 marks over here. So just in case, I'm just gonna be applying exception handling over here, and all of this is going to be going into the try block. And if there is no file, then it's just gonna print out file not found. Yeah, I think that works. So we had a local array that stored 45 items. We read each line, and then we stored it in the array, and then we close the file and then return the string. Alright, so I think it works pretty fine. Now we're gonna be moving on to part B. In part B, we have to make the function format array takes an array of strings as parameter. Alright, and it concatenates the contents of the array into one string with a space between each array element. The function returns a concatenated string. Alright, so we just have to apply concatenation over here, but for safety measures I'm just gonna be running read data and checking out if it even works. So I'm just gonna be printing whatever is returned. Alright, yeah, so I have all my data over here in this array, and apparently it works, so that's good. And now I'm going to be moving on to part B, making the function format array. Is going to be taking an array of strings, so it's just going to be array, and then I have to concatenate it, all of the contents of the array into one string. So I'm just going to be taking empty string over here, and yeah, so I'm going to be running a for loop for x in range 45. This is going to be running 45 times, and I'm going to be concatenating basically 45 words into one string with a space between. The space in between, so this is going to be like this, like string plus the array x plus a space. Or one thing I can do is just use array simply, so that I get a hold of the items directly without needing to use an index. Alright, so I think, yeah, this works. I think this works, and yeah. So I'm going to be concatenating all of the elements of the string into one string, and it has a space in between, and then I'm going to be returning this concatenated string okay. So let me just print what I'm gonna get. So I'm gonna be calling read data first, and then what I'll do is, okay, yeah, so basically I will just try to check if this works or not, and then I'll go on to the next part. But part B, part 2 just tells us to check it. So calls read data and stores a return array. So this is going to be our string array, and then which was stored in read data, it's going to be stored in string array now, and then we're going to pass, oops, we're going to print the value what format array returns to us, and format array takes in string array. Alright, so hopefully this works. Alright, it works perfectly fine. Okay, so this was part B. Moving on to part C. The function compares strings takes two strings as parameters. Alright, and then compares each string one character at a time to identify which string comes first alphabetically. If the first two characters are the same, the second character of each string is compared. This continues until the two characters are different. Okay, so it returns 1 if the first parameter comes before the second, returns 2 if not. Fine, so it takes two strings. So I'm just going to be naming this string 1 and string 2, and make sure that whenever you're naming your procedures or functions, make sure that the name is the same as the examiner has provided you with. Alright, so now we're going to be comparing each string one character at a time to identify which string comes first alphabetically. So we want to get a hold of the characters. So what we want to do is, and we have to assume that all the strings are lowercase, so we don't have to apply any lower function, and assume that a difference between the two strings will always be identified before the end of one string is reached. So basically there's not going to be any length issues of the strings, and we can identify the difference before a string ends. So that's a good that's a good approach that the examiner has taken. So we are gonna be making this function now, and while, so I'm just going to be defining a variable while there is no difference. The loop is just going to keep on running until we find a difference. So what we do is, while diff is equal to false, also let me just declare a variable. And what I've done over here is just declared an index variable to grab hold of a character in the string, and now I'm going to be comparing these. So if string 1 honestly, I don't even need to use the diff variable over here, but I'm just gonna be else continue. No, wait. Yeah, leaving this as it is makes sense. And yeah, if not, if these both are the same, then index is just gonna be incremented by 1, so that the loop keeps on going. And yeah, I think this makes sense. So what I did over here is declare a variable. Oh yeah, and I also need to declare the comments. So yeah, so I've declared these two variables and then run a while loop that if this is equals to false, then it's just gonna keep on running, and the first index is gonna be compared with the first index of the string 2, and if string 1's character is larger than string 2's character, it's gonna return 1 as shown over here. If not, it's gonna return 2, and this is gonna be continuing until the two characters are different. So if these are not different, it's just gonna be incremented by 1. Index is gonna be incremented by 1, and yeah, so in the first loop it's going to be 0, and then the second loop is going to be 1. So I think that works, and we don't have to, we can't use an inbuilt string comparison function. So alright, now moving on to part D. The function bubble takes an array of strings as a parameter and sorts the data into ascending alphabetical order using bubble sort. Alright, so bubble sort algorithm. The bubble sort uses compare strings to compare each string. The function returns a sorted list. So basically we have to make a bubble sort algorithm. So there's going to be a function, and it's going to be sorting the data into ascending alphabetical order. Alright, so we run two loops in the bubble sort algorithm, and the first is going to be for the full range of the array, and then for the second loop we use a different variable, and range length minus 1. The second loop runs an item shorter than the first loop because to avoid index out of bound errors. Alright, so with the two loops defined, we're going to be comparing the strings now. So we're going to be using compare strings, and yeah, so the compare strings returns 1 if string 1 is larger than string 2, and returns 2 if string 2 is larger than string 1. Alright, so we're going to be using the result of compare strings, and we're going to be using this by using an index. This is going to be the first item, and array y plus 1 is going to be the second item. And if the first item is bigger, it's going to be returning 1, and if the first item is shorter, it's going to be returning 2. So if value, wait, so if compare, yeah, so this is just going to be returning the value itself. So there's a value guaranteed, so I'm just going to be using this to compare it with 1, because if it returns 1, then that means that the first string is larger, and that's not what we want. We want it in ascending order, alphabetical order. So if compare strings array y plus 1 is equals to 1, then we're going to be running the infamous bubble sort. Yeah, so this is it. Now we're going to be testing our function, our whole main program actually. So part 2 tells us to call bubble with the unsorted array as a parameter, and then call format array with the sorted array and output the return string. Alright, so call bubble with the unsorted array as a parameter. We did a few things back then, so I'm just going to be doing those once again. And my unsorted array is going to be what read data is going to return to me, because read data returns the whole array, and then unsorted is going to be going into, oh wait, bubble also returns the function, returns the array. Yeah, so my read data array is stored in unsorted, and now unsorted is going to be going into bubble. So sorted is equals to, and then I'm going to be using sorted inside my format array. So 3 to 1, let's go. Alright, great. Alright, amazing. So our whole array is sorted, and it's been concatenated into a string, just as the examiner requested. Alright, great. So this was question 1, and a pretty good question. Hope this cleared up your misconceptions about string handling, file handling. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, comment down below, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Thanks.